So I went to Weatherhead School. I had unbelievable mentors there, Scott Cowan, Mohan Reddy, and others. And I worked with people in my group like Chuck Fowler, Joe Hahn, Rob Kay. We had so much fun. The doctors were the dumbest of the dumb in the class. We had no knowledge of business, and it was fun. And the best thing I learned was from Scott Cowan the first day when he said, if you think you're going to be a good businessman just because you graduate from this, you're wrong. You'll be able to go into a business meeting and say bullshit at the right time. And that helped. SAGES began in 1981 or so by a group of surgical endoscopists like myself. There were just a few of us. Gerald Marks, Tom Dent, Ken Ford, and others. And they were upset that they couldn't get their surgically oriented papers on the program at the Medical Endoscopy Society meeting, and they started SAGES. And I wasn't sure about SAGES at that time because I was already in many committees of the Medical Endoscopy Society because of PEG had increased my visibility. But I participated and I was on the governing board, and I soon became president of SAGES. Around this time in the late 80s, something unbelievable happened. It was first noted in France. Someone took a laparoscope, which was a telescope, which had been used in GYN for years, and I had actually written papers about it where you put your eye to it, and I had used it for this and that. I became friends with a guy named George Bursey who was doing it all under local for diagnostic purposes. Well, Sally was hired by Barbara Bursey. Sally was always there, but not just to run it. Sally was an advisor, someone who was always there to tell us the right thing to do, to listen to our frustration, and to help us do the best job we could possibly do.
I first met Jeff and Jackie Ponsky in 1993 when I began with SAGES. Needless to say, Jeff was one of the very early presidents of SAGES. His contributions are more than I can possibly elaborate. He is relevant to this day, and he always has been. A few memories along the years that I have of Jeff. Starting from those earliest days, there was a retreat in the woods of Cincinnati. And Jeff at one point stood on a chair. He was so passionate about the topic that he was discussing. And he stood on a chair and he was impassioned in the message that he delivered. And every time I've encountered him, he brings that passion to whatever he does. Jeff, my advice for you in retirement, not that I know anything about that subject, I'm going to quote a lecture that we both probably just heard at this meeting from John Mellinger, who was one of your trainees, I believe, and certainly won an award in your name, was, let's call it recalibrating. So here's to this next phase of your life, recalibrating. I know you will bring your personality, your passion, your love, your family, and your welcoming and inclusive nature to this next phase. And I cherish the fact that I can call you colleague and friend.
I met my friend Jeff Ponsky approximately 50 years ago, when he called as a young surgeon from Cleveland to be interested in laparoscopy performed in local anesthesia in patients with abdominal problems to create a diagnosis, take biopsies, and other minor procedures. And this is where we met first and created a very close relationship. I had a wonderful time during the years with my friend Jeff, who helped significantly in the evolution, involvement, as well as improvement of the procedure not speaking later of the flexible one in the GI system, where his lectures, his production was really a great leader. I was asked once by sages, they wanted to give me some medals, and during this, it was approximately 20 years ago, a huge cake was wheeled in. I was very impressed and was more surprised when Jeff Ponsky stepped out of this cake and greeted me. Therefore, as you can see, we had a very close relationship, and Jeff, I'm again, even in my mature age, thank you very much for your continuous advice, help, and your wife Jackie, who in our very difficult year spoke to us on a weekly basis. Jeff, you were very important in my life. Thank you very much.
This man is a very personal hero of mine and a prophet, George Bursey. I don't know what you were doing in 1962, but George wrote when he was in Australia, this is just how he speaks too, "It is to me astonishing that this method has not acquired more general interest regarding the technique of peritoneoscopy in 1962. Well, George Bursey and Worth Boyce and others have been trying to tell the whole world about doing this technique for years. Seems that the surgeons finally figured it out in 1990. He was a prophet.
Jeff, it's so wonderful to be with you on this very, very special evening for this Fedschrift. You know, we go back a long way, and I think really it's two things that brought us together. It's our love of sages and our love of flexible endoscopy. And of course, sages really brought us together. We both were there at the beginning. We've both seen this organization grow. We've both had an immense amount of fun. I remember some events that do stand out. And remember, I followed you as president of SAGES. And I remember the night, of course, when we were on stage and you rode in on this beautiful horse and you lassoed me and tied me to a tree. And I thought you were going to do something bad to my body, but I wasn't sure. But I'm glad I survived. And again, through many, many years, we've been traveling together, Donna and I and you and Jackie, and it's been absolutely wonderful. Of course, I didn't train with you, but we've had fun together. But the other thing that brought us together was our love of flexible endoscopy, our love of teaching, and you are the master teacher. And you know, one of the great things in my life was to be given the Ponsky Endoscopic Teaching Award. But I remember you're inviting me to participate in those wonderful courses that you did in Cincinnati. We did that for a number of years. And then finally, in the late 80s, we joined together and we collaborated on really the first textbook on surgical endoscopy. And that was a real joy and something that I'll always treasure. So on this special night, I can only say that I love you like your family loves you, and I wish you the best in your next career. So have a wonderful evening.
But in 1989, the people in France did this under general anesthesia and put a video camera on the end of the laparoscope and took out a gallbladder. And they showed this at the SAGES meeting in 1989 in Louisville, Kentucky. Who was president-elect of the SAGES then? Me. So I took over the presidency of SAGES at the time laparoscopy developed. I was very fortunate. Well, our society went from 300 members when I took it over to 2,000 members in a year and a half. And it was based on the growth of laparoscopy. Ironically, it was so hard to get trained in laparoscopy, but because I was president of SAGES, I had friends like Nat Soper, George Bursey, John Hunter, who helped me get trained and get instruments. And I did those procedures at Mount Sinai. Now, ironically, again, I had John Mellinger as my fellow. Picture John and I are doing our first lap chole on a board member from Mount Sinai. And who's teaching me? One of my former fellows, David Doppler, who at that time was up in the Portland Medical Center in Portland, Maine. And he comes down to teach me. He had done 8, and he came to teach me my first 2 lap choles. We sweated a lot, but we got it done. But what goes around comes around, and we got them done, and that led to a lot more in the future, a lot more things.
Jeff, there are people who go through life wondering if they made a difference. You do not have that problem. You have helped so many people throughout your career. All the patients you've cared for, all the residents and fellows you've trained, the committees and boards on which you've served, the societies you've led, and all the places you've lectured and visited. You have touched countless individuals and helped shape a generation of surgeons. More importantly, you've made a difference for your family. When I think of you sitting at the kitchen table doing your MBA homework along with your children doing their school homework. I think of you and Jackie with your children and grandchildren. You have shown all of us there is a great and important life outside of medicine. And finally, I'd like to thank you for taking a chance on a Wisconsin farm kid in 1983 as your first fellow. That decision had a great impact on my life for the better. I was able to provide services for my patients that had not been readily available previously. You encouraged me to join ASGE and SAGES, and this led to a lifetime of innovation and scholarly pursuit. In my career, I was able to perform over 40,000 flexible endoscopic procedures. Now, multiply that by the number of fellows you trained, add in the number of patients who've had PEGs performed, and the thousands of surgeons who have heard you speak. And we begin to understand the massive impact you've had on surgical care throughout the world. Thanks, Jeff, for making a difference for all of us. You should be very proud of the career you've had and all you have done. Tia and I wish you a happy retirement. You have earned it.